What's common to all languages? No, for real. Is there things that we find across languages, modern and past languages, that makes languages languages? Originally, I had to ask myself a different question. I asked myself, how different are languages from one another? But I decided to turn the question around and ask, it can seem incredibly broad, and it is, but it triggers a reaction of different questions that need to be answered in order to answer this one. Well, originally, when I asked people that I know, my friends and family, what they thought was common across all languages, they were looking for things that, or concepts that existed in different languages, words that could look alike, such as mom and dad, that have many different cognates. But there's always going to be counterexamples, because that's just the first layer of the language onion. Some people could just answer that languages, what they have in common is that they're vocalized, that they're spoken. And that would be wrong, because sign languages are 100% legit languages, and other languages can be whistled, sung, and hummed. More about that later. We have to think of a different approach to answer this question. Across the whole earth, every civilization has some sort of language, period. So we've been split up, human beings, for around what looks like to be 50 to 60,000 years. And every one of us has the ability of language. So maybe there's something in there. So maybe we could try to answer that question by looking at languages that will be simpler, a bit primitive. For example, language isolates for tribes that haven't been in contact with other languages for a long time. And maybe we could find some answers in this. But that doesn't work. This idea of primitive languages doesn't hold up. Primitive cannot be used to describe languages. As we found out, some tribes or some language isolates have remarkably complex grammatical systems and phonology systems, while others have very simple grammatical systems, not as many sounds. They don't have the concept of conjugation, and I'll talk more about that later. But one thing is sure is that all of those languages that we could consider primitive, they are all used to express nuanced and complex ideas, even if they have less of a broad vocabulary than other languages that we are used to. I'll give you a very simple example for this. English grammar can seem very easy. It has relatively few tenses, relatively regular. It doesn't have any case system, meaning it doesn't change the ending of nouns and adjectives based on their grammatical function, and it doesn't have genders. So would that mean that English is a primitive language because other languages have so many more features? No. English is just as complex as other languages, because this video was only in English so far. But yeah, cultures that mix with each other, cultures that do trades, they have a broader vocabulary. They know of more things. A great example of this is the Pirahan language. It was found, I wouldn't say discovered because it's not nice to them, but we found out about this language in the Amazon rainforest, and it is a language that's very interesting to study because it is very, very simple in its structure. So it doesn't have genders, its conjugation system is minimal, they don't have any terms to count, there's no 1, 2, 3, they just have a few and many, and they also have the concept of color. It's just dark or bright for them. And they don't even have the concept of recursivity. So they cannot say something like, the dog that I just saw left. They would express this in 2 different sentences. But nevertheless, they can express very complex and nuanced ideas, but it just goes through the lens of their culture. They will have far more many words to describe forest, to describe what they can eat and what they can't eat, to describe things that they're used to, but they don't have any concept for numbers because they don't have the concept of money in their culture, so they don't need to express numbers. But on the other hand, it has a complex tonal system that allows them to communicate through 5 different channels: talking, humming, singing, whistling, and shouting. That's just incredible, and that's far from what we could call primitive. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why we took a look at so many languages on Earth and we tried to study all the languages that we knew of. Sorry, I'm not in the frame. is to look for something that's called universal grammar. And it was just to answer this question that I'm trying to answer right now. What's common across all languages? What's the common structure that we find across all languages? That will also explain how our mind works. But that was framed differently by someone called Noam Chomsky. He's a notorious linguist, and he was looking for some sort of structure, some things, some core principles in languages of the world. Well, that was a bad idea. Some pattern that we would find across all languages. And Noam Chomsky was behind this idea of universal grammar. In 2002, he publishes in a book something about recursion being thing that we find across all known languages. So like I explained earlier, just to be able to put one sentence into another one, into another one, into another one. But as we saw, the Pirahan language doesn't obey this rule. It looks like they don't have the concept of recursion. But in reality, languages prove to be very arbitrary. Why is this called an apple? Well, you can explain this from the etymology of the word apple, but that would be, once you get to the top of the genealogy tree of the word apple, the first name, its first descendant, was named arbitrarily. Because an apple is a pomme in French and it is a yabluko in Ukrainian. It's as valid in all three languages. If you try to say, I eat this green apple, you would say, je mange cette pomme verte in French, and ja yim te zelene yabluko in Ukrainian. So green and apple get reversed in French, and Ukrainian apply a gender and a number to the word green, zelena, and it puts it in the case of the accusative. All three languages are valid in the way they express this idea of eating this green apple. None of them is more better. None of them is more correct. It's just arbitrary. So the common aspect to all languages cannot be a grammatical structure. What would be common to all languages in terms of form would be that every language has a symbol. They have symbols for actions and things or concepts that they can put together. So they have nouns and verbs. That's something that we can find across all languages. We couldn't talk about grammar. That is just the core principle of symbolization, which is very interesting, don't get me wrong. So that doesn't get us far in terms of universal grammar. But what Noam Chomsky was talking about isn't just something found in languages. It's also something that has to do with our innate ability to learn languages and to maybe make them. Because there is a language paradox, and here it is. We're all unique. Every human being is unique to some degree, yet we all manage to learn our native language perfectly, no matter our heritage. If a kid from Asian heritage goes and live in Greece, he or she will learn Greek perfectly without any difference from someone that would have a Greek descendants. So we human beings separated more than 50,000 years ago, maybe even more than this, yet we're all able to speak and learn any language. And here's what's fascinating. Children learn their native language perfectly by the age of 4 to 5. They don't make as many mistakes, let's say. But the data set they're training on, if we take a look at this from a very logical perspective, this data set is too scarce to explain such a high level of mastery of their native language. They don't test every possibility. They don't learn in a probabilistic way. They have something innate to learn their native language. So there is in kids an ability to find structures, to find patterns that is a bit more sophisticated than a probabilistic system. They can't do it like computers and just test every possibility because there is a cajillion of them. It's infinite. We can make an infinite amount of sentences in every language. And not to mention that they don't really they don't take into account corrections that they get from their parents. At least that's what Noam Chomsky says. So they have inside them this universal grammar, something that helps them learn languages. There's definitely something there. So now we're left at this. The common aspect to all languages is that they're human created and evolved. They're means of communication that could be through different channels, just like sign languages, whistling, anything. and that all of us can learn thanks to our innate abilities and dedicated brain circuitries. Except there isn't any one brain region or structure that could explain our ability to create and learn languages. Sure, we have a bigger and more evolved prefrontal cortex that has more folds. Some of our brain regions are more developed than other mammals or apes, for example. But there isn't any brain region that's used just for speech production and understanding. Wernicke's and Broca's area? No two neuroscientists can agree on where they're situated exactly in the brain. Even more than this, some stroke survivors that have Wernicke's and Broca's area damaged, but that have intact subcortical structures, can still understand and produce speech. And the other way around is also true. So what do we even know? As always in neuroscience, the simple and elegant explanation pointing out to well-delimited brain regions to explain such a complex behavior as language gets swiftly dismissed for a more complex and detailed and accurate explanation that involves many different brain regions. There isn't just one brain region for speech. Speaking makes use of the whole brain, and I'll give you a very simple explanation. If you think about a dog, right? When you think about this word, you also would see on a scan that areas of the brain that are associated with experiences that you might have had with dogs, such as smelling dogs or feeling them or seeing them around you, will also light up. And it's the same thing for anything or concept that you have in your brain dictionary. Your brain dictionary interconnects many different brain regions that are used for different senses. If you know about that word in the first place, or that concept, try to mime a word that you're looking for next time that you're searching for a word, right? If you want to say the word bike and then for some reason it doesn't come to you, when you have it on the tip of your tongue, you can mime or represent that word very easily, because all of the experiences that you have around bike or dog or shelter or anything, they get connected to the word, to the concept in your brain. So speaking, just for vocabulary, involves many different brain regions. Wow. We started asking, what is the common aspect to all languages? And now we're left with more questions that we've started with. Yeah. At least, please, Luca, tell me that all languages are human, that the ability to speak is a human thing. This kind of needs nuance. Well, it's a very human-esque thing to think that we are unique, that we are the apex of all life on Earth, which to some degree we are. After all, we're the only species endangering hundreds or thousands of others. In biology, we have a tendency to think that, we have a human-centric bias that makes us think that certain features of our biology uniquely human. We used to think that tears of joy were something that was uniquely human, but some preliminary research shows that dogs can shed tears of joy too when they reunite with their owner. As we kind of find out more about the biology of other species and our biology, we understand that some stuff isn't uniquely ours. Language is 100% human. There's no way. In the form we use it, sure, it is. We haven't noticed any other animal giving TED Talks, so it's pretty clear that we human have the most developed form of language. But after trying to teach bonobos and chimpanzees, our closest relatives, for decades, we started to teach them how to sign, because they can't really dissociate the use of their vocal folds, of course, same thing, from their emotional reaction. Kind of like we're not able to control our heart rate all that much. So researchers focus more on teaching them how to sign, because they too use sign communication between one another.
Gestures are also used between chimpanzees who are friendly to each other. Here, a female uses a loud scratch to request her groupmates to groom her.
Through symbols, we were able to show chimpanzees and bonobos, I think it was, and they were able to point to some symbols to make requests.
Now, What did you want? Sweet potato, celery, and lettuce.
So they too are capable of some sort of language. But is the word language adapted? I don't think so. I'm not sure, because they cannot express an infinite amount of ideas. They're not able to tell you what they were doing yesterday, for example. Oh, but that brings up an interesting question. Is it possible that we are human because we have language? Or is it the other way around, kind of like we assumed before? We are a unique species that was able to make language, to invent, to come up with language. Maybe language made us human. And more than a few scientists think that it can be the case. If you look at this problem from a Darwinian and biology standpoint, meaning that you consider innovation to be the result of random mutation that gave an edge for survival and reproduction, and if it was helpful enough for survival and reproduction, it was adopted by everyone. If we attack the problem from this angle, there's no way that language was just one mutation that we came up with, or that happened in some human and that just spread all of a sudden. It must have come and evolved from something much simpler. And by the way, we used to think that the eye was something that was way too complex and way too perfected to have evolved from something simple, from something very, very primitive. But we actually know now that the eye has had its fair share of evolution. It developed from skin that is sensitive to the light, and then it formed around this with evolution, with Darwinian evolution. So maybe it's the same thing for language. And if we take a look at our closest relatives, bonobo and chimpanzees, like I said before, they sign. They are able to make requests or simple statements, communicate with others based on signs. It's not crazy to assume that our languages evolved from sign language too. And actually, that's what Michael Corballis thinks. That's the person I got this from. Some 3 to 4 million years ago, after we, as a species, our ancestors separated from the genealogic tree of apes, we maybe started signing, because as we stood up, we had our arms free. Now, as we saw, sign languages can be incredibly complex. They can express the same things as spoken languages. So it's not crazy to assume that we were signing at first, and then because of the shortcomings of sign languages, because there are some, it takes a lot of energy to sign. It also makes communication very complicated when you have something in your hands, or when you're far from someone or behind someone. So maybe this communication, those movements, they might have come up to our face where our gaze is naturally directed at. And since a lot of our face isn't actually visible, is in our mouth, maybe vocalization came after, so that we could make more signs, so that we could communicate better. Look at this place. Isn't it beautiful? But there is one element that supports this idea of the evolution of language being continuous over thousands and thousands of years, that I will share with you right now. But let's go back to the studio. Back inside. Okay, so what's that element about the human anatomy that shows us that language has evolved from something? It has been around for quite a lot of time. Well, we'll have to take a close look at our throat and our pharynx or cavity, tongue. What's up, guys? Luca from the future here. How have you been? Okay, so basically I got it here because I started going into detailed explanation about our larynx, our throat, the supralaryngeal vocal tract, all of this. But it turns out that it's not very interesting for the video. So I'll just sum it up real quick. This argument about language coming from evolution, having evolved like any other biological feature, is really supported by the fact that our larynx and our throat in general isn't a survival advantage. So basically, food and water can easily get down our trachea, which is why we can choke on stuff. And this is a hazard we can die from this. But the other thing is that the same throat is also allowing us to speak and say all the sounds that we can say. A, E, I, O, U, O, U, Every human being has this feature that allows speech to be intelligible, but that doesn't represent a survival advantage in and of itself because we can choke. That must mean that the survival advantage of speaking, of being able to communicate, outweighed the hazard of choking. And the reason why we can pronounce all those things, if you want the details, of course I'll put everything in the show note captions, but it's the ratio between this, our throat, of the tract here, and our mouth, right? So this is basically a 1-to-1 ratio, kind of. And animals, for example, have a very short supralaryngeal vocal tract and a very long snout, right? It's a long mouth. They have snouts. So do monkeys, by the way. That's why they cannot pronounce English words. I don't know why I'm whispering, but it feels good. So basically, that's the end of a very long video about language. What's common to all languages? Not much, and everything at the same time. Languages are super complex. There's no language, no form of language that's not complex. Every human being on earth has the ability of language. Language is through symbolization. All this, we can say that it's common to all languages. The rest, there's always going to be outliers. If you want a more clear-cut answer, then we'll have to get a bit philosophical. What's common to all languages is that they make us human. That's it. Yeah, and that they're all beautiful in their own way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really enjoyed researching, scripting it, going in the woods with my dog to film the video and present it to you. I hope that you liked it. Tell me if you want more videos like this that are a bit more produced, that take me more time. I think this one took me more than 3 weeks. This was Luke and Andre. À bientôt.